Okay, beta. This was the first concept, transferring of position line. There was no wind in the area. There was no current in the area. So we drew the two position lines, selected any random point A, applied our course and distance vector, reached to B, then transferred our position line and we got our position. And then we reproduced the course to steer or course made good backwards and found out our initial position. This was the first transfer without wind and without current. Then moving further in the second example, we saw there was a wind in the area. So northwesterly wind, we applied that wind, found out our leeway track, and using the leeway track, we transferred the position line. So exactly same transfer, only thing is we have used the leeway track in this case. And then after this, in the next example, we took some current. And in the case of current, we made this course, distance and current vector triangle, found out position C and transferred the PL here, got our 2130 fix and then reproducing it backwards 2000 fix. So this is what we had done in the last lecture. Now we will be proceeding to transferring of the position line with wind and current both. You want me to repeat this current triangle once again, or is it okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to wind and current combined together.
No, sir. Please repeat, sir.
इसको
repeat
कर
करवा
लें?
दो सर.
Yes, sir.
क्या रिपीट करना है बेटा? करंट वाला रिपीट करना है, विंड वाला, या विदाउट विंड एंड करंट भी रिपीट करना है?
नहीं, विदाउट वाला ओके सर, विद वाला कर दीजिए.
ओके, ठीक है बेटा. लेट्स डू, देन आई विल स्टार्ट इट फ्रॉम विंड वन. दिस वन इज क्लियर ना बेटा, विदाउट विंड एंड करंट, और यू वांट टू रिपीट दिस टू?
ओके सर, एक बार बता ही दीजिए सर फिर.
ठीक है बेटा. लो बेटा, keep the volume up.
Thus, this method does not apply to non-straight line PLs like the PL by depth contour. One method of drawing a unique straight line, as learned under the video on PLs, is to know a point through which to draw the straight line and the direction of the straight line. In context of the PL, this becomes a point through which to draw the PL and the direction of the PL. To transfer a straight line PL, we transfer any point on the PL. We take up any point of our choice. We run it up for the duration for which the PL has to be transferred. And the transferred PL is then drawn through this transferred point, and the direction of the transferred PL is the same as the direction of the PL being transferred of the first PL. The transferred PL is indicated on the chart by two arrows at each of its free ends with time to which it is transferred indicated against it.
So beta, just quickly give a recap to all the points and let me know any doubts coming in the mind.
Okay sir, clear.
Very good.
Now let us list down the methods for transferring the PL. So the steps are listed down in sequence. Take any point on the first PL, any point of your choice. Imagine the vessel to be at that point. Well, we know that we only have a PL, we do not have the position. Vessel could be anywhere on the PL, but we just imagine the vessel to be at that particular point, because then it will become easier for us to remember and execute the process. Determine the position where the vessel would have reached from its assumed position at the end of the interval for which PL is being transferred. The position thus obtained is the position to which the point on the PL, the assumed point on the PL, is transferred at the end of the required interval. Through this transferred point, draw a line parallel to the first PL. This line drawn parallel to the first PL through the transferred point is the transferred PL. Indicate the transferred PL with 2 arrows at each of its ends. Also indicate the time to which the PL has been transferred.
So beta, again give a quick recap to all these points. Let me know the doubts.
सर 4th पॉइंट
इसमें क्या डाउट है बेटा?
सर इसमें ये समझ में नहीं आ रहा कि जो मतलब ये लाइन समझ में नहीं आ रही सर, बोलना क्या चाह रहे हैं सर?
ओके बेटा, नंबर 3 समझ में आ गया? Determine the position where vessel would have reached from this above imaginary point at the. ये क्लियर है?
यस सर, यस सर कि दूसरी जगह कहाँ पे हो जाएगा?
राइट बेटा, ये जो नया पॉइंट हमारे पास आएगा, जो नई पोजीशन हमारे पास आएगी, इसी नए पॉइंट या नए पोजीशन में हमने अपनी पुरानी पीएल को ट्रांसफर करना है.
ओके सर.
ओके, अभी हम प्रैक्टिकली चार्ट पे करेंगे. ओके, लेट्स मूव अहेड.
So now the only thing we need to know is how do we transfer up the assumed point on the first PL. Of course, we take any point. The point can be any point of your choice. We imagine the vessel to be at that point, as already said earlier. Now, if we have to find the vessel's position at the end of the required interval, then we need to allow for the forces which cause displacement to the vessel. So all the displacement vectors or forces causing displacement of the vessel need to be allowed for. And what are these forces or vectors? One is because of the ship's own propulsion, represented by the course to steer and the engine distance. The other could be because of the wind, which is applied through its leeway. The other could be current, which gets applied or allowed through its set and drift. Now, in each case, you may be experiencing either one of these factors, 2 of them, or maybe all of them. So depending on how many of these are applicable in a given scenario, we allow for that many factors and find out the position where the vessel would have reached from its assumed position on the first PL. The position thus obtained is the transferred point. For transfer the first PL through this transferred point to obtain the transferred PL.
So beta, any doubt in these points?
No sir.
Okay, very good.
Now let's look at this entire exercise through some examples so that we allow for these factors in different combinations. A vessel steering 070 degrees true at 12 knots observes Roche's point light bearing 010 degrees true at 2000 hours. At 2130 hours, it observes Belly Cotton Island light bearing 320 degrees true. If there was no wind or no current during the interval, find the vessel's position at 2000 hours and 2130 hours, CMG and the SMG. So we start with the identification of the landmarks. So here we have identified this is Roche's Point and this one is Belly Cotton Island. You can see where these boxes have come up. We draw the first PL of 2000 hours. This is the first PL. We draw the 2130 PL, indicated time against it. Now we pick up any point on the first PL. So this point A is any randomly selected point on the first PL. Now the vessel is experiencing displacement only because of her own propulsion, as the problem statement says no wind and no current. So through A, we draw CTS. This CTS is represented by single arrow, you can see. The magnitude of this vector shall be the engine distance for 1.5 hours, interval between 2000 hours and 2130. So at 12 knots, the distance becomes 18 miles. So from A, we mark off 18 miles and we get point B on the CTS line. Now B, we all know, would be the DR position of the vessel. But in this particular case, since there is no wind, no current, so this also happens to be CMG line. So you can see two vectors coming up on this line. So this is CTS as well as CMG line. And distance AB is the engine distance and also becomes the distance made good in 1.5 hours. So because vector AB is CMG line and distance AB is the distance made good, so point A is transferred to point B. So through B, we transfer the first PL. You can see it here. The transferred PL in red is represented by two arrows at each of its end. You can see time for 2130 indicated against it. So now we have one transferred PL for 2130 and we already have another PL for 2130 where they intersect. This becomes the vessel's position at 2130. So point X represents the position of the vessel at 2130. Now, how the vessel would have reached this point X? Vessel would have reached point X by making good a course whose direction is represented by AB, CMG. So that means the vessel would have reached point X by traveling over a track represented by AB direction and passing through point X. Now this one. So that means the vessel would have basically traveled along this track, which is the CMG track, and at 2130 reached out here. So that means the vessel would have been here at 2000 hours. So where this CMG transferred through point X cuts the 2000 hour PL, this becomes the 2000 hour position. So point Y is the fix at 2000 hours. Point X is the fix at 2130. Y to X direction represents CMG and distance Y to X represents distance made good in 1.5 hours. When this distance made good is divided by 1.5 hours, it shall give us the speed made good by the ship in knots.
So beta, have a good look at this plot now and let me know any doubts coming in the mind.
सर मैंने स्टार्टिंग में हैंड रेज किया था सर, आपने देखा?
Ask again बेटा.
सर मैंने स्टार्टिंग में हैंड रेज किया था सर, आपने देखा नहीं इसको के सर?
ओके ओके,
मैं अभी पूछ लेता हूँ सर से.
हाँ बेटा अब पूछ लो बेटा.
सर जो ए पॉइंट
देता ना, your raised hand I cannot see because screen is on share. Anyway, तुम पूछो बेटा.
ओके सर, नो प्रॉब्लम सर. सर जो अपने ए पॉइंट लिया है सर, वो अज्यूम कर लिया 2000 आवर उस पे पोजीशन लाइन पे सर, जो भी मतलब कोर्स है जो वहां से लाइट हाउस की बेयरिंग है उस पे
राइट,
ए पॉइंट फिर अपने यहीं पे क्यों ज्यूम किया, कहीं भी कर सकते हैं ना?
बिल्कुल बेटा, आप जहां चाहो ए पॉइंट को ले सकते हो, कहीं पर भी इस लाइन पे आप ए पॉइंट को लेना चाहो आप ले सकते हो बेटा।
ओके सर। और उससे 070 का ट्रू का वो कोर्स उससे खींचना है सर आगे।
दैट्स राइट बेटा।
ओके सर, जो वो बी को क्रॉस करेगा सर, जो बी वाली पोजीशन होगी 2130 की।
इसे क्रॉस नहीं करेगा। जब हम 070 का ये डायरेक्शन में लाइन खींचेंगे, फिर हमें इस पे
यस सर।
1.5 आवर के लिए अपना इंजन डिस्टेंस कट करना होगा। ओके, हमारी स्पीड 12 नॉट है, तो 1.5 घंटे में इंजन डिस्टेंस 18 माइल हो जाएगा। तो हमने ए से कंपस को सेंटर किया, 18 माइल्स की आर्क से जब इसको कट किया तो हमें बी पॉइंट मिल गया। ओके बेटा।
ओके सर, 18 माइल के लिए अपन ने सर कंपास से मेजर करके कट कर लिया, और जो कि हमारा
राइट,
बी पॉइंट हो गया।
राइट बेटा।
ओके सर। उससे फिर अपन ने सर ये जो उसके बाद में जो लाइन ड्रॉ की है सर, वो समझ में नहीं आया।
कौन सी वाली? रेड कलर वाली लाइन बेटा?
ये ट्रांसफर सर, जो बी पॉइंट से और एक्स पॉइंट से जा रही है सर, वो 2130 वाली, वो समझ में नहीं आया सर, रेड कलर की।
ओके बेटा, ओके। इस लाइन को बनाना बहुत ही आसान है। जब आपको बी पॉइंट मिल जाता है, तो आपने अपने पैरेलल रूलर को फर्स्ट पीएल के साथ अलाइन करना है यहाँ पे। फर्स्ट पीएल 20
ओके
पीएल
सर,
के साथ,
इसके पहले में।
और फिर उसे यहाँ पे आपने ट्रांसफर कर देना है टू पास फ्रॉम पॉइंट बी।
ओके सर,
ओके
ठीक है
बेटा,
सर।
और बताओ और क्या डाउट है?
ओके सर, फिर ये अपने को एक्स पॉइंट मिल गया सर। फिर फिर अपन ने कोर्स, जो भी अपना ट्रू कोर्स था वेसल का, उसके पैरेलल वो एक्स वाई पोजीशन लाइन मार दी सर, यही है ना?
बिल्कुल बेटा, बिल्कुल।
ओके सर।
क्लियर हो गया सारा? वेरी गुड।
ओके सर। सर, इसकी इस पे डिस्टेंस वगैरह तो डिफरेंट हो जाएगी हर सिनेरियो में?
आस्क अगेन बेटा।
अगर डीएमजी पूछता है यहाँ पे, तो डीएमजी तो सर फिर डिफरेंट रहेगी, क्योंकि अपन ने ए पॉइंट, जो ए पॉइंट लिया उसको कहीं भी ले सकते हैं सर।
नहीं बेटा, आप ए पॉइंट को कहीं भी ले लो, इसको जहां मर्जी ले लो इस लाइन पे। जब आपको ये एक्स वाई डिस्टेंस मिलेगा या ए बी डिस्टेंस मिलेगा, ए बी और एक्स वाई दोनों सेम हैं, ये बिल्कुल एक जैसा ही मिलेगा, इसमें कोई डिफरेंस नहीं आएगा। आप इसे प्रैक्टिकली भी चार्ट पे करके देख सकते हो।
ओके सर, ठीक है सर, ट्राई करेंगे चार्ट पे, फिर आपसे क्लियर करेंगे
ओके
अगर
बेटा,
कुछ।
वेरी गुड।
तो
ओके,
डीएमजी हर सिनेरियो में सेम होगा?
नहीं, हर एक सिनेरियो में नहीं बेटा। यहाँ पे देखो
सॉरी,
विंड भी
इसी
थी।
इसी केस में, इसी केस में सर, अगर ए पॉइंट को अपन कहीं भी अज्यूम करेंगे, तो वो डीएमजी सेम ही आएगा, आपका कहने का मतलब यही है ना?
हाँ बेटा, क्योंकि ए बी को तो हमने अपने इंजन स्पीड के हिसाब से काटना है ना। तो अगर ये 12 नॉट है, हम ए को कहीं भी ले लें, जो ए बी की लेंथ होगी वो तो 18 माइल ही रहेगी ना।
हाँ सर, 18 माइल ही रहेगी सर।
तो वो सेम आएगा।
जैसे सर अपन ए पॉइंट को, जैसे आपने 20 100 आवर लिखा है ना, जो
हाँ,
पहले जो फर्स्ट फर्स्ट लाइन ड्रॉ की
इसके
थी, जो फर्स्ट
ऊपर।
बेरिंग जो ड्रॉ की थी। हाँ,
हम्म,
जैसे हाँ, इसके यहाँ पे जो ब्लैक में 20 100 आवर लिखा हुआ है ना, अगर
हम्म,
यहाँ से हम खींचते और बी वाली लाइन तक ले जाते, तो ये ना क्या बोलते, 18 माइल का अपन इस पे वो मारते सर, पोजीशन पॉइंट
राइट,
मारते, बी पॉइंट। और
राइट।
उसके अगर पैरेलल करते तो डिस्टेंस तो फिर एक्स वाई की तो ज्यादा होती ना सर,
नहीं बेटा,
क्योंकि उनका
कहीं
तो
ज्यादा नहीं।
एरिया बढ़ गया ना।
नहीं बेटा, बिल्कुल ज्यादा नहीं होती, एग्जैक्टली सेम रहती डिस्टेंस। अभी मैं आपको इसकी एक असाइनमेंट दूंगा। उस असाइनमेंट के जब आप सवाल करोगे ना, तो उसमें इस ए पॉइंट को ना एक बार ऊपर एक बार नीचे आगे पीछे करके देखना। आपको हर एक केस में जो x और y पॉइंट हैं वो सेम मिलेंगे।
ओके सर।
ओके बेटा,
ओके सर, ओके, थैंक यू।
अब ये समझ गया बेटा अच्छे से मेथड?
हाँ सर, ये मेथड तो समझ में आ गया सर।
वेरी गुड। अब बेटा इस मेथड में ना हमारे पास विंड थी ना करंट थी। अब विंड को लेके आते हैं, लेट्स ब्रिंग द विंड।
सर कोई और भी पूछ रहा है, सॉरी सर,
हाँ
कोई
हाँ
और भी
बोलो
पूछ
बेटा,
रहा है सर।
बोलो बेटा बोलो।
सर हम हर मेथड में ऐसे ही करेंगे, जैसे फर्स्ट बेयरिंग से हम विंड एंड करंट का इफेक्ट जो भी है, इंजन स्पीड और ये सब लगाएंगे, या फिर हम ऐसे, मैं ऐसे भी कर सकता था सेकंड वाली बेयरिंग से, अगर अपोजिट ड्रॉ करता कुछ, तो उस केस में पॉसिबल तो नहीं होगा ना सर ये?
ओके बेटा, व्हाट आई अंडरस्टैंड, आप ये कहना चाहते हो कि अगर मैं 2130 बियरिंग पे कोई पोजीशन लूं और उस पे बैकवर्ड चला जाऊं और
यस
फिर
सर,
यही काम बैकवर्ड करूं, राइट?
यस सर, एग्जैक्टली सर।
राइट बेटा राइट। आप इसे वैसे भी कर सकते हो, मैथमेटिकली इसे वैसे भी किया जा सकता है। उस केस में जो आपकी ट्रांसफर्ड पीएल आएंगी दोनों की दोनों वो 2000 पे चली जाएंगी और आपको पहले 2000 की फिक्स मिलेगी, राइट बेटा?
ओके सर, बट उस केस में मेरे को कोर्स कोर्स तो अपोजिट रहना पड़ेगा ना, क्योंकि अगर इस केस में मैं जैसे कि नॉर्थ ईस्ट जा रहा हूँ तो उसमें साउथ वेस्ट जाऊंगा मैं।
यस बेटा, जैसे इस केस में कोर्स 070 था तो उस केस में आपका कोर्स जो है वो 250 होगा क्योंकि आप रिवर्स में जा रहे हो। ओके, सो
यस सर।
मैथमेटिकली इसे किया जा सकता है, लेकिन नॉर्मली चार्ट वर्क में हम इसे ऐसे नहीं करते हैं। हम हमेशा जो हमारी पुरानी पीएल होती है उसे नई पीएल या रीसेंट पीएल उस पे ट्रांसफ़र करते हैं ताकि हमें कोर्स को हाई डायरेक्शन में ही लगाना पड़े। ओके,
यस सर, उसमें फिर
नॉर्मली
करंट का
चार्ट
केस
वर्क,
होगा तो और भी मुश्किल हो जाएगा।
राइट, सो नॉर्मली हम चार्ट वर्क में आगे ही जाते हैं। हाँ, अगर किसी क्वेश्चन में हमें पीछे जाना पड़े उस केस में पीछे भी जाया जा सकता है। जैसे अगर वो आपसे पूछे ही कि भाई मुझे तो 2000 की ही फिक्स चाहिए, मुझे 2130 की फिक्स नहीं चाहिए, तो फिर ऐसे केस में आप पीछे जाके भी 2000 की फिक्स निकाल सकते हो, दैट इज नॉट रॉन्ग।
ओके सर।
ओके, लेट्स प्रोसीड अहेड नाउ।
In this case, of course, CTS and CMG are same, engine distance and distance made good are same. Why? Because there was no wind and no current. So you can see other notations also showing up. Let's take another scenario. Vessel steering 070 degrees true at 12 knots. Observes Roche's Point light bearing 010 degrees true at 2000 hours. At 2130 hours, it observes Ballycotton Island light bearing 320 degrees true. Same as before. If during this period it experienced northwesterly wind causing 3 degrees leeway but no current, find the vessel's position at 2000 hours and 2130 hours, CMG and SMG. As you can see in this question, that we'll have to allow for ship's own propulsion vector and also we'll have to allow for wind. So let us see how do we allow for the wind, which we have already covered earlier under allowing wind and current. But let's quickly allow for wind and proceed with the question. So we identify the two landmarks, of course. These are the two PLs which we have already covered in the first discussion. We take any point. Now this light green vector which you see is the CTS vector 070 degrees true. Vessel is experiencing northwesterly wind, that means wind is coming from northwest. So northwesterly wind would be as represented by this arrow, wind arrow now in the diagram. Now since we have to allow for leeway, please remember we have to allow for leeway. When we allow for leeway, leeway is factored or allowed to the lee side of the vessel or to the downwind side. In this case, you can see the starboard side of the ship is the lee side, So the leeway is factored onto the starboard side. You can see 3 degrees of leeway showing up on the screen. And what you get with dark green line is the leeway track or the effective course track, which is also represented by a single arrow. And you can see in this case, the leeway gets added to CTS to give us the effective course.
So beta, this is clear, allowing for leeway.
Yes, sir. Clear, sir. Lee side, sir. Always.
Very good, beta. Very good.
As also explained in the video on allowing for wind and current, on chart we may prefer not to plot both these vectors because they will unnecessarily clutter the chart. So if you wish, you may allow for wind on the answer sheet, as you can see the steps showing up in the box. CTS 070 degrees true, leeway 3 degrees, northwesterly wind. Why the wind direction is being reiterated here? Because it has to be seen in conjunction with the CTS to decide whether leeway is to be added or subtracted. And so the effective course becomes 073 degrees true. So what we'll do is we'll restart our plot, and instead of drawing CTS, we'll draw the effective course of the leeway track of 073 degrees true. And of course, the magnitude of this, as already explained in the earlier videos, would be the engine distance for the required duration. So now we start with the effective course of 073 degrees true. Landmarks identified, both PLs plotted on the chart. We take any randomly selected point on first PL, and this time what we draw through point A is the effective course of 073 degrees true. This will also be represented by single arrow. The magnitude of this would be the engine distance for 1.5 hours, that is 18 miles. We get point B. That means the vessel from A would have reached point B after 1.5 hours because she would be moving along her effective track. So this also happens to be her CMG line. So point A, as already explained, is transferred to point B. In the previous discussion, where there was no wind, it was a 070 degrees true into 18 miles track. This time it is 073 degrees true into 18 miles. Point B is to the point to which A is transferred. PL is transferred through B, marked with 2 arrows at each end. Time of transferred PL indicated, and this is the 2136, X is 2136. Now the CMG line represented by AB transferred through X, giving us position at 2000 hours, that is point Y. So Y is the 2000 hour position, X is 2130 hours position, Y to X direction is the CMG, which is 073 degrees true in this case, and Y to X is the distance made good in 1.5 hours, which will lead us to speed made good.
So beta, I hope it is clear up to here.
बस सर अपन ने ना कोर्स जो अपन ने कोर्स स्टीयर था उस पे लीवे लगा के और फिर बस सेम ड्रॉ करना है और कुछ नहीं है सर इसमें, वही है ना सर?
Yes beta, that's right.
Okay sir, up to here clear sir.
Okay beta, let's proceed ahead now. Let's see the current now.
Yes sir.
Now let's take up the questions. Same problem, only thing is this time no wind but experiencing current. A vessel steering 070 degrees true at 12 knots observes Roche's Point light bearing 010 degrees true at 2000 hours. At 2130 hours, it observes Pellicotton Island light bearing 320 degrees true, same as earlier cases. If during this period it experienced current setting 180 degrees true at 2 knots but no wind, find the vessel's position, CMG and SMG. Now, as already explained during the allowing of wind and current, we have to ask ourselves the question, are we going to counteract current or allow for current? In this case, we have CTS, CMG is to be found, so it shall be allowing for current. There is no wind, so the two displacement vectors are one because of ship's own propulsion and the other is because of the current. So let's get going with the question. We'll identify the landmarks. We draw the 2000 RPL. We draw 2130 PL. We take any point on first PL. Now we draw the CTS through it, indicated by single arrow, mark off engine distance for 1.5 hours, that is point B. So this is 070 degrees true into 18 miles. Now we have to allow for current. I hope you remember when you allow for current, the current is applied at the DR position or the arrowhead end of the CTS line. That means now the current has to be allowed at point B. So we allow the current here, represented by 3 arrows. The rate of the current is 2 knots. So in 1.5 hours, the drift would be 3 miles. So we mark off from B 3 miles on the current sector vector, and we get point C. B to C is 180 degrees true and 3 miles off. So A to C now gives us the CMG, and A to C gives us the DMG in 1.5 hours. So if the vessel was at point A at 2000 hours, then because of her own propulsion and the current, in 1.5 hours, that is 2130, the vessel would have reached point C. That means point A stands transferred to point C. So this time the PL shall be transferred through point C. So we transfer the PL through point C, indicated by 2 arrows at each end, time indicated against it, and where it cuts the 2130 PL, that becomes point X, the 2130 fix. Again, like the previous questions, she would have moved along her CMG track in reaching this position. So we transfer the CMG through 2130 position, where it cuts the 2000 PL, that becomes point Y and 2000 fix. So in this question now, point Y is fixed at 2000 hours, point X is fixed at 2130 hours, Y to X is the CMG, and Y to X is the distance made good in 1.5 hours, when divided by time of 1.5 hours shall give us the speed made good.
So beta, have a good look at the plot. Let me know any doubts coming to the mind. Okay, so shall we move ahead, beta?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
So now you see what we have learned in the previous videos. If we are thorough with that, these questions will automatically start falling in place. Now let's take the last example in which we have both wind and current. Same vessel steering 070 degrees true at 12 knots, observes Roche's point light bearing 010 degrees true at 2000 hours, 2130 bore, 320 degrees true. During this period, the current was setting south as in the earlier case at 2 knots and northwesterly wind causing 3 degrees leeway. Find vessel's position at 2000 hours and 2130, CMG and SMG. Before I start plotting, I ask myself a few questions. In this case, we have the vessel's propulsion, we have the current, and we have the wind. First, we ask ourselves a question, do we have to allow for wind and current, or do we have to counter it? Obviously, your answer would be allowing. Why? Because CTS is known, CMG is to be found. If they have to be allowed, in which order to allow? Please remember your earlier knowledge. They have to be, you have to first allow for wind and then allow for current. Wind, as explained earlier, can be allowed for on answer sheet. So as seen when we had the wind problem earlier, when we had the wind problem, we got an effective track of 073 degrees true. So in this case also, when you allow northwesterly wind, the leeway track shall automatically be 073 degrees true. So we get going with the plotting. Identify the landmarks, draw the PL at 2000 hour, draw the PL at 2130 hours. Take any point on the first PL, that is A. Now what do we draw through A is the effective course of 073. How many arrows do we represent it with? Single arrow. What will be the magnitude of this vector? Engine distance for 1.5 hours, 18 miles. Cut that off and we get point B. Now because it is 073, so wind is already allowed for. Now we allow for current for 1.5 hours, so we draw the current at B, represented by 3 arrows. Drift in 1.5 hours at 2 knots will be 3 miles. We get point C, 180 degrees into 3 miles from B. Now A to C becomes the course made good, and point A is transferred to point C. Why? Because if the vessel was at point A, steering 070 degrees true at 12 knots, experiencing wind and current as given in the question, then she would have done this effective course, and this current would have brought her to C. So point A gets transferred to C. So now we transfer the first PL through point C, mark with 2 arrows, indicate the time, and we get the position at 2130. Draw the CMG through this position, where it will cut the first PL, that becomes the position at 2000 hours. So point Y is the fix at 2000 hours, point X is the fix at 2130, Y to X is the CMG, and distance Y to X is the DMG in 1.5 hours, giving us the SMG. So now we have seen the examples in which we had no wind, no current, then we had only wind, then only current, and now we had wind as well as current.
So बेटा अब इसमें बताओ मुझे, अगर कोई डाउट आपके माइंड में आ रहे हैं, लेट मी नो.
नो सर.
क्लियर है बेटा? पूरी तरह से क्लियर है?
यस सर. यस सर.
वेरी गुड बेटा. नाउ बेटा ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, दिस इज ए वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट. नॉर्मली चार्टवर्क में हमारा अबाउट एक क्वेश्चन हमारे पेपर में इस कॉन्सेप्ट पे आ ही जाता है. सो दिस इज ए वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट, द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ रनिंग फिक्स. अब आपने बेटा, मैं आपको एक असाइनमेंट भी दूंगा इसके लिए करने के लिए, बट असाइनमेंट विल बी, लेट मी सी, असाइनमेंट जो है, जो आपके पास आएगी नंबर 2 असाइनमेंट, 2 छोटे छोटे टॉपिक, छोटे तो नहीं, इंपॉर्टेंट वो भी. सो 2 टॉपिक और करेंगे, उसके बाद मैं आपको एक असाइनमेंट दूंगा. वन इज ट्रांसफर ऑफ पोजीशन सर्कल, अनदर इज हैविंग ए लाइट हाउस एट एन एंगल. तो आपने इस टॉपिक को जो हमने आज किया है इसे पक्का कर लेना है. पक्का कैसे करेंगे? इफ़ यू वांट टू वॉच द लेक्चर अगेन, I hope you will be downloading and then watching it, or this is available on our YouTube channel also. So go there and watch this video, either way, whichever way you like, till the time everything becomes crystal clear in your mind. अगर एक बार देखने में आपको समझ में नहीं आता है, you watch it again. नहीं समझ में आता है, watch it again, so that this concept gets cleared in the mind. This is a important concept as far as Chartwork is concerned. So with this we are almost done with our session. 2 minutes to completion of the session. So please clarify this concept, and मेक श्योर दैट देयर आर नो डाउट्स इन द माइंड. अगर कोई डाउट्स आते हैं नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में, एज आई मीट यू, आई बिलीव आई हैव लेक्चर विद यू टुडे आल्सो.
यस सर.
Yes, sir, you have one more class.
ओके बेटा, ओके. सो उस अगली क्लास में बेटा कोई भी डाउट अगर आपके आते हैं तो उन डाउट्स को क्लियर करेंगे. अदरवाइज फिर हम अपने अगले टॉपिक पे चले जाएंगे, विच इज़ ट्रांसफ़र ऑफ पोजीशन सर्कल. वो भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है, ये दोनों इंपॉर्टेंट है. सो दैट्स ऑल फॉर दिस सेशन एंड गो थ्रू दिस टॉपिक. Whatever doubts come, please note them down and ask me when I meet you again.
ओके सर.
Okay beta,
Thank you,
okay, see you, bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
थैंक यू सर.
Thank you beta.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you beta.